Well, I think, the Warriors are the obvious ones, so I like to focus on a couple of the other ones. I think there's a couple. First to me is anybody going to challenge Cleveland? I think Toronto in the Eastern Conference is a legitimate challenger. The question is the pressure of getting out of the first round going to be too much for them? Because they know a lot of people are talking about that. The last 2 years, they really underachieved in the first round. They got sent home. Lowry and DeRozan did not play great in the playoffs. So now there's so much talk about it. Sometimes you can just talk yourself right into it. And if they drop one of those first 2 games at home to Indiana, they could be in trouble. If they can survive the first round, I really like Toronto's team this year. I think they've got great depth. They've got athletes on that second unit that can really run and defend. So that, to me, is a big storyline in the Eastern Conference. Is anyone going to give Cleveland a legitimate challenge to come out of the East? I think Toronto is capable. And then in the Western Conference, we know it looks like it's going to be Golden State, San Antonio. So I want to know, is Oklahoma City a legitimate threat to San Antonio in the second round? And for me, in order for that to happen, their late-game decision-making has to be much better. They take panicked, quick, rushed, long jump shots, Durant and Westbrook both. And there's no need that if they move the ball a little bit more patient when those games are on the line, which several of those in that series are going to come down to the last 3 minutes. If they execute their offense and get better shots, then they have a legitimate chance, I think, to hang with San Antonio, maybe even beat them. But that's a big if, because Oklahoma City hasn't proven to me that they've really gotten over that hump and how they close out games.
They'll play Dallas. Tim, let me ask you about Oklahoma City. Is this the last hurrah for that bunch? Is this the last Oklahoma City run that this group will make?
I'm not sure, because Kevin Durant's such a hard guy to read. He hasn't really even, obviously addressed any of this about his impending free agency. I think a lot of it is going to depend on what happens in the postseason. Certainly, if they get knocked out in the first round, that's just a death blow, I think, to his chances of staying there. But if they go toe-to-toe with San Antonio, they lose a 6 or 7 game series, he's got a tough decision to make, because at that point he's going to ask himself, are we close enough? And particularly how it plays out with he and Westbrook and their chemistry on the court, and how that works out in the playoffs. I think Kevin Durant in some ways is using this as almost as an audition. Also, Billy Donovan's ability to handle the pressure of the playoffs. I think he's auditioning for Kevin Durant. So a lot of it's going to be decided, I think, what happens over the next 4, 6, 8 weeks with Oklahoma City. I wouldn't rule him out staying there. He's a different kind of guy. He likes the small market. He's not looking for limelight. He doesn't need to be in a big city with a ton of marketing deals. He's not that kind of person. So he's comfortable where he is. The question he's going to have is, would he have a better chance going to a place where he is clearly alpha and he's not kind of sharing that role with another guy, and then you build a team around his skills and give himself a better chance. And that might mean coming to the Eastern Conference if he really wants to have a legitimate, better opportunity to get to the finals and win championships.
Tim Legler is with us. NBA playoffs on 97.3 ESPN. ESPN Radio has Oklahoma City and Golden State. And you wonder what the future of Oklahoma City is without those guys, if that area will sustain. I mean, they got lucky that they had 2 unbelievable superstars dropped in their lap. And you talk about free agents, and the same thing you mentioned, Toronto. You wonder, DeRozan, is he putting on an audition here as well for his future for the Raptors?
Yeah, it's interesting. He's another big one. There's going to be some shifting. There's no question about it. A balance of power. Yeah, you're right. Oklahoma City has kind of had lightning in a bottle. They even had James Harden there at one point. So you look at the talent that they've had. For whatever reason, they haven't been able to break through. And I've said this repeatedly about star players that come into the Western Conference. It's so deep and loaded out there with young talent that you could spend the first decade of your career and not really have a legitimate opportunity to win a championship. And now all of a sudden you look up, you're 30 years old, and you haven't even started that process yet, which every great player knows they need to add to their legacy. So it's a tough road out there, and they haven't really capitalized on it. They got to one final. I believe they thought, hey, maybe it's going to be like this every year. And as you can see, they haven't gotten back yet. And they've had some injuries that they've dealt with along the way, but it's a big question mark. There are star players that are constantly looking now. It's different than it used to be, where you just stayed with your organization for your whole career and tried to make it happen. That's not the mentality anymore. Now guys will go chase it if they think they've got a better opportunity to get a ring, and they'll try to pair up with another star player. It's a different era, different mindset that players have nowadays.
ESPN Radio has Detroit-Cleveland on Sunday. All the coverage on ABC and ESPN television as well. Tim Legler is our guest, and the NBA playoffs start on Saturday. Here close to home, Legs, we know the Sixers were a mess in terms of record-wise on the floor. I'd like to hear your take on what has happened over the last 2 weeks with the Colangelos coming in, the Hinkie Manifesto. Is this team finally in the right spot? Now, the people out there, I'm amazed at the amount of people. Now, I will be honest, I was on board with what they were doing. I'm amazed at the amount of people who are in an uproar about what's going on, and I guess that has to do with, as Josh Harris said, the optics of how this all went down. But what is your take on what has happened in Philly over the last couple of weeks?
Well, I think you hit it on the head. For me, I think they're trying to get this thing cleaned up and get it going in the right direction. And finally, instead of being in this, this constant mode of literally driving it into the ground, well, guess what? You've hit the ground. And now it's time to start taking some of these assets and doing something with them and start getting a winning environment, and at least the mentality that you're trying to win now, trying to develop, trying to put together a roster that works. And they weren't doing that. And I think now, with what's going on the last couple of weeks, I think they're trying to clean house and trying to say, okay, this is what we need to do. I'm okay with what they've done, but the optics of it make them look even more disorganized than everybody thought they were in the first place. But at the end of the day, forget about the process to get there. If they get there and they get the right people in place and they start moving in the right direction, that's really all that matters if you're a Sixers fan. And I think they might be finally doing that. Now, obviously, they need a break with this lottery. They have to get the ping pong ball bounced the right way, and they have to get certainly one of those top two guys. If you get Ben Simmons or Ingram, you're fine. They have to come away with one of those two, or this, I think what's going on the last 2 years, it wouldn't have been worth it, because I think those are, now look, I'm not saying there won't be another guy somewhere down the road in the draft that Chris Dunn, for example, who knows, he could turn into the next Chris Paul. I don't know that. I know Ingram and Simmons are headed for stardom. They're the kind of guys you can build around and be your marquee player and your franchise-type guy. And so they need to get one of those two players.
Brett Brown make it through all this?
Well, that's a good question. I was surprised they gave him the extension when they did. I've had a very difficult time evaluating Brett Brown because of the product that they had, the players that they had, the personnel. How can you really evaluate a coach if you really don't know if there's more than 2 or 3 guys on your roster that are going to be here in 2 or 3 years? And that's what they've been going through the last couple of years. I haven't seen a team that was very organized on the court at times, but I try to give Brett Brown the benefit of the doubt. I don't know what it's like to coach every night when you aren't even close to the talent level of the team you're playing against. It's a very difficult position in professional sports to put yourselves in. So let's see. This next year, I think you have to start to see some signs of cohesion and a team that's got more of an identity, because I didn't see an identity this year with the team. And now Brett Brown, I think, starts phase 1 of his audition. And maybe it's a year, maybe it's 2 years, but he has to show that this team's headed in the right direction, and people can start to identify with what kind of team they have here.
It's Tim Legler, and the ESPN the NBA playoffs begin. It's tomorrow. The Pacers and the Raptors on ESPN, the Rockets and the Warriors on 97.3 ESPN, and of course, the Sixers looking forward to the NBA draft and a very important offseason. Legs, we appreciate a couple minutes.
Mike, anytime. Good talking to you.
All right, Tim Legler, everybody. There you go with the Sixers and the NBA playoffs. I agree with Legs. The NBA Eastern Conference dark horse, we're looking at Toronto, and who can beat the Warriors? That's your storyline.